I felt it before I understood it, an almost imperceptible shiver through the comm relays, a vibration that rippled along the diplomatic frequencies like the whispered cry of something dying in the dark. We all felt it. Every species attuned to the politics of this turbulent arm of the galaxy sensed that something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. But none of us imagined this. The first transmission arrived fractured, burned at the edges by static. Screams, many species' voices, flickered beneath the distortion. Alerts flashed red across my console, but even before the data reconstructed, I sensed the shape of disaster forming in the void. And then the image resolved. A human medical frigate. Designation AHS Mercy's Promise. Hull white and soft blue, adorned with the universal sigils of healing. No weapons, no armor beyond basic shielding. A ship built not to fight, but to save. Inside it, children from 5 species, elderly evacuees, wounded civilians rescued from a border conflict the humans weren't even part of. The next frame seared itself into my memory. A spear of plasma piercing the hull, breaching deck after deck, fire blooming through sterile corridors like a demon's breath. The ship detonated in a silent flash of white. I did not breathe for several seconds. My throat sacs tightened so violently I feared they might rupture. Even the ambient hum of the embassy control room seemed to hold its breath. But I had already begun pulling sensor echoes, tracking energy signatures. The attack was deliberate, calculated. The signature belonged to... But no, I couldn't yet accept it. I needed confirmation. More transmissions arrived, raw footage from civilian transports nearby, each showing the same merciless strike. Human medics shielding children with their own bodies. Volunteers pulling patients towards escape pods that would never open. Silent flame swallowing hope. The room spun. I steadied myself on the console. And then came the human response. Earth's diplomatic channel activated itself with unusual urgency. Not panic, not chaos, but precision. Human Ambassador Reeves appeared on screen, his face carved from a resolve so sharp it felt dangerous to witness. His voice was level, even gentle, but his eyes, those human eyes, fire trapped behind calm glass. "We are gathering all data," he said. "We will present it to the Galactic Council." Justice. Humans spoke that word with a weight most species never comprehended. To them, it was not a concept, it was a duty, a covenant etched into bone. Behind the ambassador, I saw movement. Military analysts, emergency officers, entire teams activating protocols with frightening speed. Humans had always been intense when tragedy struck, but this was something else. It felt ancient, instinctual, a species-old reflex awakening in their collective bloodstream. Mobilizing, already, before the council even convened. My quills stiffened in a slow wave along my back. I looked toward the vast viewport of the embassy, out into the spiraling arm of the galaxy where the hospital ship had died. The void there felt darker now, as if recoiling from what it had just consumed and from what was coming. Because it was coming. I had seen humanity go to war before. Their fury was not wild or reckless like the Corthid mercenaries. Human rage was structured, directed, weaponized by discipline. But it was their purpose I feared most. When humans believed the innocent had been violated, something fundamental in them shifted. A line older than their species' written history became illuminated. Protect the helpless. Avenge the fallen. And never, never let such a crime go unanswered. As more human fleets were pinged across interstellar channels, their beacons flaring awake one by one, I felt the tremor again, this time not subtle, but vast and rising. A storm gathering pressure. The galaxy did not yet understand it, but I did. The attack on the hospital ship had not merely taken lives. It had lit the fuse of a force that would reshape entire star systems. I turned to the communications officer, trying to speak calmly. "Send word to the council." He nodded, but hesitated. I looked once more into the void, toward the drifting debris still glowing from the explosion. "Toward whoever did this," I whispered. But heaven would not, and humans did not ask. The storm had begun to rise. The Galactic Council chamber, vast, resonant, and usually humming with the layered rhythms of politics, felt as silent as a tomb. A silence so heavy it pressed against my throat sacs and coiled coldly around my spine. Even the air recyclers, normally a comforting background drone, seemed to dim themselves, as though unwilling to disturb the humans seated at the center of the room. 37 species, 37 banners, 37 cultures, accustomed to debate, to posturing, to noise, now reduced to breathless stillness. And at the center stood the humans. Ambassador Reeves stepped forward with the slow, deliberate gait of someone carrying a grave and ancient burden. In his hands, gloved not out of protocol but out of reverence, he held a scorched, twisted fragment of alloy. The metal still bore singe marks, faint lines of melted circuitry, and a partially intact emblem, the blue-ringed insignia of a medical frigate, a piece of mercy's promise. He placed it gently upon the holopodium. The chamber lights dimmed, the holodisplay ignited. Blue-white spectral illumination washed across our faces, revealing every uneasy twitch, every quivering crest, every tightening of spines and mandibles. The first image appeared. Drifting medical pods, ruptured open like cracked eggs. Bodies floated in slow, mournful spirals, weightless in the void. A Cathari representative let out a soft keening. One of the Jorah diplomats covered her ocular fronds. The next recording appeared. Interior corridors. Fires flickering in oxygen-rich pockets. Nurses crouched over patients, arms wrapped around them in a futile instinct to protect. Species I recognized, some I didn't. Every one of them lifeless. Not a single pulse. Not a single survivor. The chamber responded not with noise, but with profound, visceral stillness. But the humans? They watched. Eyes unblinking. Faces carved from composure, and something deeper, something like commitment. No, not commitment. Oath. They absorbed every frame, every scream, every drifting, lifeless form with a discipline that felt unnatural, terrifying. Their grief did not break them, it sharpened them. When the final image faded and the chamber lights returned, Ambassador Reeves did not begin with anger. He did not shout or tremble or accuse. He simply said 8 words. The words hit me like a pressure wave. Across the chamber, crests flared in alarm, mandibles clicked uncontrollably, throat sacs constricted. A few representatives whispered translations to their aides, as if they had misheard. But they hadn't. Humanitarian intervention. We all knew what those words truly meant. When humans invoked that phrase, they weren't speaking of gentle negotiations or weary peace talks. They meant force. Precise, overwhelming force, deployed in the name of those who could no longer speak for themselves. And once humans invoked it, nothing in the galaxy could soften their trajectory. The murmurs rippled outward like waking tremors, but none of us dared oppose them. Not after seeing that footage. Not after witnessing the immaculate stillness of the humans as they faced the deaths of their own. I felt my own quills rising along my back. This wasn't just diplomacy anymore. This was ceremony, a prelude, a marker of something irreversible. The council's voting matrix illuminated, casting colored lights across the curved chamber. One by one, species cast their decisions. A few hesitated, most did not. In the end, the result glowed a bright and terrible gold. Unanimous approval, full military clearance granted to Earth. Reeves bowed his head slightly, not in gratitude, but in acknowledgement. The humans rose as one, their movements synchronized with unnerving precision. Their boots struck the polished floor with a muted thunder that vibrated through my claws. For a moment, I imagined the sound echoing across entire star systems. The Corthid Dominion had fired on a hospital ship. The humans now carried the Council's blessing to respond. As they filed out of the chamber, every representative leaned back instinctively, as though giving passing room to an oncoming storm. The doors shut behind them. Only then did I realize what we had truly done. We had not granted permission. We had signed a warrant. A warrant carried now by a species whose mercy was admirable, but whose vengeance was legend. I exhaled shakily, my throat sacs trembling. May the stars show mercy to whoever struck that ship, because the humans would not. The warning klaxons across Earth's orbital ring hadn't even faded before the construction arms began their synchronized dance. For the first time in centuries, humanity was mobilizing its full military-industrial complex, and the galaxy watched with a mix of awe and dread. 1. The Awakening of the War Machine. The narrator describes arriving in Earth orbit expecting to see standard military readiness, perhaps a few battle groups mustering, some emergency refits. Instead, they find the void choked with shipyard scaffolds, drone clusters, and kilometer-long assembly platforms. Entire continents of metal float in orbit, each one glowing from the burn of welding lasers and reactor tests. Human ships emerge from these docks not as vessels, but as declarations. Carriers the size of cities roll out first, their armored hulls painted a matte black that seems to drink in starlight. Frigates and destroyers follow, angular and predatory, railgun carriages rotating like creatures scenting blood. Medical cruisers arrive last, their once white hulls now layered with ablative plating and deflector arrays, because this time the humans expect the enemy to aim for the healers first. From a distance, it looks like a tidal surge of steel crescendoing into readiness. 2. The humans who will sail them. The narrator turns their attention to the crews assembling on the platforms. They've seen human soldiers before, loud, warm, joking even during deployments. Not today. What walks the gantries are soldiers forged by grief and tempered by discipline. Their movements are clipped, efficient. Their conversations are short, precise, each word delivered with purpose. Every officer wears a black mourning band stitched into their uniform, not as a symbol of loss, but as a solemn oath. This is not rage. This is not blind revenge. This is the quiet, deadly resolve of a species that has decided a line has been crossed. Medics pack supply crates with shaking hands, but their eyes are controlled, fixed. Engineers work in teams, checking one another not because they mistrust, but because they refuse to let a single mistake cost another life. Pilots move with a rigid focus, as if they've already accepted their deaths but are refusing to let it deter them. Some whisper names under their breath, loved ones lost in the previous attack. Others write memorials on their gauntlets or the inside of their armor plates. One pilot kneels beside her gunship, pressing her forehead to the hull like a priest communing with a god. The narrator realizes, humans grieve before battle, so they do not falter during it. In practice, they quickly understand this is a courtesy at best. They are not here to contribute, nor to advise. They are simply present to witness something the galaxy hasn't seen for centuries, the full weight of human military resolve. Human commanders treat them politely, but the energy is unmistakable. You are with us, but this is our war. Do not interfere. Do not slow us down. The narrator feels small watching humans coordinate across thousands of ships with a calm intensity that makes even battle-hardened alien veterans uneasy. 4. Rituals of the soon-to-be departed. Before departure, the humans perform a series of rituals. Some are military traditions, others personal. A squad of Marines sits in a circle, sharpening vibroblades in silence. Engineers attach dog tags of fallen comrades to the frameworks of the ships they'll guide. A chaplain walks the length of a hangar, offering blessings to those who want them and quiet presents to those who do not. In the viewing deck, a single human plays an old violin. No one speaks, no one moves. Even the narrator feels compelled to stand still. It is a symphony of mourning, yet also a declaration of readiness. 5. Departure. The moment the stars flinched. When the final launch command is given, the fleet aligns with mathematical precision. Carriers take the center. Frigates spread into a lethal veil. Medical ships form the heart, shielded by layers of escorts. Then the engines ignite. Thousands of fusion drives flare simultaneously, painting the black of space with a temporary dawn. The narrator swears the stars themselves dim. Whether from the light or from fear, they cannot tell. Humanity has always claimed they are not conquerors. They are not warmongers. They only fight when they must. But when the galaxy forced their hand, humanity answered not with fury, but with inevitability. The Kortha Dominion had always considered themselves master tacticians, calculating, anticipatory, able to map an enemy's likely actions 10 steps ahead. Their mistake was assuming humans fit into any pattern at all. They had studied Earth's treaties, its peacekeeping efforts, the gentle diplomatic tone its representatives always used. They saw hesitation. They saw restraint. They saw ethical constraints and mistook them for weakness. What they never understood was this. When humans restrain themselves, it isn't fear, it's mercy. And mercy ends the moment someone targets the helpless. 1. The Dominion's confidence. From atop the fragmented ridge of a shattered moon, the narrator and the alien delegation watch the Korthid armada assemble in the space below. The debris field, jagged, metallic, and still faintly glowing from ancient bombardments, forms a natural observation post. The Dominion fleet arrives in tight, immaculate formations. Their battleships gleam with obsidian plating polished like ceremonial armor. Gunships form geometric grids, precise enough to be mathematical artwork. Their flagship towers among them like a floating temple to arrogance. They broadcast their approach across all frequencies, not tactically, but performatively, blaring the tonal roars of their victory hymns, claiming dominance before the battle even begins. The narrator feels an instinctive chill. This is not confidence. This is hubris so dense it defies gravity. 2. Humanity's evidence. When the humans arrive, they do not decloak dramatically or announce themselves with trumpets of reactor burn. They appear silent, enormous, and ready. The Korthid admiral immediately opens a channel, expecting arguments, demands, or pleas. Instead, the humans transmit a data packet directly into every Dominion display. The final hours of the hospital ship. Not edited, not stylized. Raw sensor feed. The Korthid bridge crews are forced to watch. The first barrage that struck the medical bays. The screams across filtered audio. The shields failing as the ship tried to protect the evacuees. The final explosion that tore it apart. The Dominion admiral watches the footage with amusement at first, then with a casual shrug. Finally, he emits that guttural laugh, deep and resonant, that scrapes against the narrator's senses like serrated stone. To the Korthid, grief is a paralyzing weakness. In their culture, losses are shameful burdens, not motivations. The narrator immediately understands the Dominion's fatal flaw. 3. Misunderstanding the human soul. The Korthid believe humans should be devastated, broken, bargaining for peace. They assume the broadcast is an appeal for pity or remorse. But humans don't want remorse. They want responsibility and consequences. When the Korthid admiral finishes laughing, the human admiral doesn't react. No emotional outburst, no dramatic speeches. Just a long, silent pause across the comms. the kind of silence that makes even the narrator's fur stand on end. 4. The formation shift. Without a word, the human fleet adjusts formation, smoothly, simultaneously, like a single organism deciding it has waited long enough. Carriers move to the rear line, opening their hangar bays with predatory calm. Fighter wings launch in disciplined waves, hundreds of ships fanning out in perfect arcs. Frigates form a spearhead, angled for direct penetration of the Dominion front. Rail cannon signatures spike, their magnetic coils humming so deeply the vibrations travel through the moon's crust beneath the narrator's feet. The Corthid admiral straightens, confidence wavering. He expected grief. He received inevitability. 5. The final human warning. Only then does the human flagship, Horizon's Wrath, open a final comm channel. The screen reveals its captain, calm, composed, eyes carrying the weight of far too many funerals. Her voice is steady, devoid of theatrics. You targeted healers. You targeted children. She cuts the channel before the Dominion can answer. 6. The moment of realization. The narrator watches the Dominion bridge crews falter. The confidence drains from their movements. Their ships shift uneasily. Even their admiral's quills bristle in alarm. Across the battlefield, humanity advances, not with rage, but with purpose. A cold, methodical determination forged from loss and sharpened into a weapon. For the first time since the conflict began, the Corthid Dominion hesitates. Not because they fear defeat, but because, finally, they understand what they have provoked. They made humans stop speaking and start acting. I have studied war all my life. I have archived the last breaths of dying empires, witnessed the burning of continents, recorded sieges so long that the original attackers died of old age before their heirs claimed victory. I believed myself immune to shock, to horror, to awe. I was wrong. The humans taught me that. The moment their fleet crossed the threshold of the battlefield, something changed. Not in the stars, but in the people who sailed between them. I had expected fury, roaring vengeance, perhaps even unrestrained fire meant to scorch the Dominion from existence. That is what most species do when wounded so deeply. They lash out, they thrash, they become chaos incarnate. Humans do not. Not when the stakes are sacred. Their wrath goes cold. It began with silence, a silence so profound that I felt it more than heard it, like the vacuum had thickened around us. No battle cries, no celebratory declarations of retaliation. Only the quiet, synchronized hum of human war engines preparing to strike with the inevitability of falling worlds. Then the first salvo launched. Rail slugs shot across the void, each one a needle of condensed intent. They struck Corthid weapon arrays with pinpoint accuracy, severing entire batteries without damaging civilian compartments. Missiles spun in elegant spirals, bypassing panicked shields to neutralize engines, command spires, or shield projectors with surgical elegance. Directed energy beams carved through destroyers like scalpel strokes, not cleaving them apart, but disabling them piece by piece. Humans were not attacking. They were dismantling. The Corthid Dominion, terror of 5 sectors, realized within minutes that they were prey, trapped beneath the gaze of a species that had chosen not to rage, but to act. Cruisers broke formation and fled, their helms shaking with panic. Destroyers broadcast surrender codes so hastily they overlapped into static. Some Corthid officers abandoned stations entirely, driven by primal fear rather than protocol. Humans acknowledged none of it. A Dominion destroyer tried to jettison lifeboats before the humans reached them. A single human frigate fired, one shot, one engine disabled, leaving the ship stranded rather than destroyed. Another vessel attempted to self-destruct to avoid capture. A human EMP torpedo neutralized its core before it could detonate. This was not cruelty. This was control. I watched a human marine squad breach a Corthid dreadnought, They moved like shadows cast by the same flame, coordinated, swift, deliberate. Their armor was scarred from previous battles, their visors reflecting flames and drifting debris with ghostly calm. There was no shouting, no chaos, only crisp commands, readouts, mutual confirmations. Duty incarnate. The Korthid soldiers on board fired wildly, frantically, desperate in their terror. The humans did not rush. They advanced methodically, disabling weapons, disarming combatants, securing corridors with lethal efficiency. Not one Marine fired a shot at a non-combatant, even as alarms blared and smoke choked the air. Humans carried their grief into battle, but not their anger. And then came the moment I will never forget. The Korthid admiral, instigator of the atrocity, the one whose laughter had echoed across the comms, fled to an escape pod. His claws trembled as he initiated launch sequence. He never got the chance. A single human fighter severed the thruster assembly with a laser pulse so precise it barely scorched the hull. The pod drifted, inert. Minutes later, human Marines cut through the hatch and pulled him out alive. Alive. Not for revenge. Not for torture. For trial. Because even at their coldest, humans do not abandon justice. As the Dominion fleet collapsed into paralysis, and the humans completed their mercilessly precise advance, I felt my throat sacs tighten, not from fear of humans, but from something far stranger: respect. And the realization that a species capable of such controlled wrath could reshape entire civilizations when they chose to. And that day, they had chosen to. The galaxy would never forget it, and neither would I. Kor Mal filled the lower hemisphere of my vision like a great obsidian eye staring back at us. A world forged by conquest, etched with fortresses, wrapped in orbital rings that glittered like the spined carapace of some titanic predator. For generations, the Korthid Dominion had proclaimed it unassailable. Their capital, their pride, their throne of fear. Humans saw something else entirely. To them, Kor Mal was not a fortress, it was the source, the birthplace of the order that condemned a hospital ship full of innocents. The nexus of propaganda that kept its citizens blind. And yet, as the human fleet drifted into formation above the planet, I sensed no eagerness to annihilate, only a colder, far more disciplined intent. Humanity had come to end the Dominion's reign, not its people. The sky above Kor Mal ignited in silent flashes as human destroyers aligned themselves along a perfect triangular vector. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then 3 rail cannons fired as one, lances of light so precise they struck the planetary shield generator's nexus points simultaneously. A shimmering dome collapsed inwards like a dying star. Orbital cannons spun to life in panic. They never got the chance to fire. Human carrier wings descended in tandem, their fighter squadrons weaving an intricate pattern of disabling sweeps. Every beam, every missile, every electromagnetic burst struck with mathematical intention. Not one veered toward a civilian district. Not one caused atmospheric destabilization. It was surgical dominance, an operation on a planetary scale. For the first time in my career, I witnessed an entire world go still. Kor Mal's defense grid faltered. Its orbital rings sputtered. Its proud cannons flickered out. And then, the lights across the planet dimmed as human cyber teams breached the Dominion's primary command lattice. They moved through enemy code as effortlessly as their Marines moved through enemy corridors. Unseen, unstoppable, inevitable. Then humanity spoke. A single broadcast flashed across every screen, every military console, every public square. The voice was calm, almost gentle. This ends today. That was all. No threats, no promises of destruction. just a phrase delivered with the quiet certainty of a verdict already reached. I watched from the observation deck as the message rippled through Cornwall cities. Civilians poured into streets, staring up at the sky where human ships drifted like silent judges. Soldiers hesitated, claws trembling on weapon grips. Officers shouted orders that no one obeyed. For the first time in my lifetime, I saw fear break a government from the inside. Not fear of annihilation, fear of human restraint. Every Corthid on that planet understood something profound in that moment. If humans had wished to destroy Cornwall, it would already be ash. The fact that it still stood, untouched, was the most powerful demonstration of their dominance. Minutes later, the Dominion's ruling council transmitted its surrender. The military dissolved into disarray. Entire battalions laid down arms. And the civilians? They simply watched, confused, terrified, but very much alive. Human dropships descended like falling stars. Their marines moved through the streets not as conquerors, but as guardians restoring order. And when I witnessed the first sight of human medics kneeling beside Corthid hatchlings, offering water, checking wounds with steady hands, I felt a tightness swell in my throat sacs. These were the same humans who had lost their own children aboard that hospital ship. The same medics whose colleagues had died trying to shield alien infants in their final moments. And yet, here they were, protecting the children of their enemy. Cornwall could have been a graveyard. Instead, Earth made it a beginning. In that moment, I understood. Humanity's wrath may be terrifying, but their mercy, that is what reshapes galaxies. The Hall of Sovereigns had once been a symbol of absolute Corthid authority, an obsidian structure, towering above the capital like a raised fist. Now, half its balcony lay shattered, its pillars cracked, its banners torn and blackened by the fires of the uprising that had toppled the Dominion's rule. It was there, among ruin and revelations, that humanity chose to hold the tribunal. Not in a courtroom, not in a fortress, but in the open air, before the eyes of a world that once cheered for war. The Corthid admiral, the architect of the hospital ship massacre, stood bound beneath the pale sun. His armored scales, once polished to a mirror sheen, now seemed dull, almost gray. His mandibles twitched with reflexive defiance, a last remnants of a pride that had no place left to hide. Then he saw the human commander. More specifically, he saw the gauntlet. The names engraved along its surface glinted sharply in the morning light. Rows upon rows of etched letters, some human, some belonging to other species, each representing a life lost on the hospital ship he had ordered destroyed. The admiral's confidence cracked. His mandibles sagged. For the first time since his capture, fear truly entered his eyes. The trial began. Humanity did not shout. They did not threaten. Their representatives presented evidence with calm precision, each holodisplay projecting the final transmissions of the hospital ship, the intercepted command orders, and the Dominion's internal communications. The crowd, thousands of Corthid civilians, watched with gradually widening eyes. Some gasped, some trembled, some lowered their snouts in shame. Then came the testimonies. Corthid officers, former subordinates of the admiral, stepped forward, shaking, their spines quivering with guilt and relief. They revealed encrypted directives, black box recordings, and handwritten confirmations of the admiral's intent. He had ordered the hospital ship's destruction not out of desperation, but as a calculated act. A display of terror meant to intimidate neutral worlds. A message drenched in blood. The admiral spat curses, claimed weakness, claimed necessity, claimed victory. But his words fell dead in the air. No one believed him, not anymore. The human commander stepped forward only once, saying nothing at first. Instead, they placed a small, blackened piece of metal onto the tribunal podium, a scorched fragment from the hospital ship's children's ward. The silence that followed was suffocating. When the human finally spoke, it was not with fury. Justice is not vengeance. Those words echoed through the broken hall and across the plaza below. When the verdict was reached, humanity did something that rippled across every listening star system. They handed judgment to the Korthid people, not because they were relinquishing responsibility, but because they believed that accountability must come from within. The crowd was hesitant at first. Then a voice rose, another, then hundreds, then thousands. The verdict was unanimous: condemnation. The admiral's crimes were branded unforgivable, his punishment declared as life imprisonment, not execution. The galaxy reeled at this decision. Even I, who had known humans for years, felt my throat sacs tighten in disbelief. Humanity had every right to demand blood. They chose restraint. After the tribunal concluded, I walked among the streets of Cornwall. Human engineers were already working to stabilize power grids and rebuild shattered infrastructure. Their medics knelt beside injured Korthid citizens, treating wounds with the same steady tenderness they had shown across war-torn human colonies. But what struck me most was the memorial. In the capital square, where statues of Dominion conquerors once stood, the humans erected a monument of polished steel shaped in a single upward spiral. At its base were the engraved names of everyone lost aboard the hospital ship: human, alien, child, elder, all equal in remembrance. Korthid civilians gathered around it, some in silence, some weeping, some placing offerings of their bone cultural tokens. And I understood, in that moment, a truth that resonated deeper than any war report or diplomatic treaty. Humans break empires not because they are powerful, not because they are ruthless, but because they choose mercy when others choose fear. Their wrath is devastating, but their mercy is what changes history. Long after the fires dimmed and the fleets withdrew to their distant sectors, the echoes of that conflict continued to pulse through the galactic consciousness. Historians would record the tactics, the maneuvers, the astonishing precision with which the human fleet dismantled a force 3 times its size. But that was not what the galaxy remembered. Battles fade, wounds heal, but meaning endures. And what endured was the moment carved forever into the shared memory of countless species when humanity stepped out from the smoke, not as conquerors, not as executioners, but as guardians offering a hand to the very galaxy that once feared them. Trade routes reopened first. Slowly at first, as diplomats and merchant plans tested whether Earth's promises of protection would hold. They did. Human escort ships accompanied the first refugee convoys returning to burned-out colonies. In some systems, human engineers arrived before the refugees themselves, repairing orbital docks, restoring water grids, and stabilizing damaged moons. It wasn't repayment. No one had asked. It was simply what humans did. And the galaxy watched. Species that once labeled humans as unpredictable, volatile, and emotionally unstable began to reevaluate those assumptions. They had now seen something few ever imagined possible: an apex predator civilization capable of terrible fury, yet choosing mercy. A species with the physical and technological capacity to end enemies, yet repeatedly selecting the harder path, the path requiring restraint, the path requiring memory. For many, the most haunting and beautiful moment came during the memorial ceremony on Cornwall. Word spread across systems, then across sectors, then across galactic arms. By the time the event began, thousands had arrived. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with Korthids, Varnathi, Delrune, and dozens of species whose governments had once advised them to avoid Earth. The twin moons of Cornwall hung low and luminous above the gathering, casting silver light across the plains where the temporary memorial structure had been raised. At the center of the ceremony stood a single restored artifact, the memory core from the destroyed hospital ship, recovered from twisted metal and drifting debris, painstakingly reconstructed by human engineers. They had worked in silence, treating the core not as machinery, but as a last surviving witness. When it powered on, projecting fragments of its final recordings, laughter in the medbays, messages left unread, doctors running toward danger instead of away, the crowd fell into reverent stillness. Even species with no concept of mourning felt something shift within them. Lanterns were distributed, bioluminescent spheres for some, plasma-bound light orbs for others, traditional fire-lit paper lanterns for humans. One by one, they lifted into the night sky, rising like a river of stars ascending toward the moons. Each represented a life lost aboard the hospital vessel. Each carried prayers, regrets, and hopes in 100 languages. And then came the final lantern. It was larger than the rest, crafted from shattered hull plating and illuminated from within by the memory core itself. Humans had embedded it into the lantern's heart, allowing the ship that had saved thousands through its lifetime, to release its own memorial light. Silence swept the plains as human commander Arlen Voss stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "We remember," he said softly, his words carried by quiet amplification. There was no applause, no roars of approval, just a shared universal stillness, as if every species present understood they had witnessed a turning point, not in war, but in civilization. From that day forward, humanity was no longer seen merely as another young, ambitious power in a galaxy crowded with elder empires. They became something else entirely, a stabilizing force, a civilization whose emotional depth, once considered a liability, became its greatest strength. A species whose grief birthed resolve, whose fury remained tethered to principle, whose memory bound them to justice rather than vengeance. A guardian species. And so the galaxy would not forget, not the tragedy, nor the battle that followed, but the choice humans made afterward. A choice that redefined them in the eyes of billions. The day humanity answered unimaginable loss, not with annihilation, but with a fleet of fury guided by unwavering principle. That was the day the galaxy learned who humans truly were. And it would remember. Forever.